The giant meeting hall of the Galactic Council was full of scared voices and worried faces from across the galaxy. Ambassador Kelron from the peaceful Zilani race walked slowly to the center of the room. His four long arms were shaking as he turned on the floating screen that showed his beautiful home planet Verdania. But what everyone saw made their blood run cold. Dark, moving shapes covered the entire world like a disease. These weren't normal ships or armies. They were alive, growing, and eating everything in their path. The once green and blue planet now looked sick and dying, covered in black wounds that kept getting bigger. Kelron's voice came through the translator, broken and desperate. The Korthok swarm broke through all our shields and weapons 3 days ago. They don't just destroy things like normal enemies. They eat everything. Our beautiful cities where millions lived are gone. Our forests that took thousands of years to grow are being turned into food for these monsters, even our people. His voice stopped for a moment. We think in 3 days, maybe less, there will be nothing left of our world. The room became very quiet. Every alien leader knew about the Korthok swarm. They were like a nightmare that traveled between stars. For over 100 years, these biomechanical monsters had eaten 47 different worlds. They weren't just animals or machines. They were both, and worse than either. They could think, learn, and change faster than any normal army. The Korthok worked like one giant brain spread across millions of creatures. When you shot at them with energy weapons, they would grow thicker skin. When you used explosives, they would learn to dodge. When you tried to poison them, they would become immune. No matter what tricks or weapons the galaxy's smartest species used, the swarm always found a way to beat them. High Admiral Vexen of the proud Taldari stood up. His people had the most advanced space navy in the galaxy, with ships that could destroy moons and shields that could stop exploding stars. But even his voice sounded defeated. We sent our best fleets against them before. Ships that took decades to build, weapons that cost more than entire planets. The swarm just learned. In hours, they figured out how to break through defenses that took us centuries to perfect. By the time our scientists created new weapons, the monsters had already grown beyond them. Other council members nodded sadly. The Zarian Empire had lost an entire battle group trying to save one world. The Crystal Federation watched helplessly as their most beautiful colony became food. The Eternal Collective, who had lived for thousands of years, admitted they had never seen anything scarier than the Korthok swarm. The silence stretched on until Counselor Neareth, an old and wise leader, said the words that made everyone uncomfortable. There's one choice we haven't tried yet. We could ask the humans. The reaction was immediate and strong. Beings from across the galaxy made sounds of fear, disgust, and worry. Humans, those crazy, violent creatures from that horrible death world they called Earth. Most of the galaxy still couldn't believe these primitive barbarians had been given a seat on the council just because they figured out how to travel faster than light 50 years ago. Earth was known throughout the galaxy as one of the most dangerous planets ever. Discovered, it had killer weather that could level cities, animals that evolved just to hunt and kill, diseases that could wipe out entire populations, and an environment so harsh that most galactic species needed special suits just to breathe the air. The humans not only survived there, they thrived and conquered their entire world. But they were still so young compared to other races. While the Taldari had been building star empires for 50,000 years, humans had only left their home planet recently. Their ships were crude, their weapons were simple, and their tactics were considered barbaric by civilized standards. Far away from the council meeting, on a human warship called the EU's Defiance, Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the emergency message came through. Jake was a tough man in his 40s, with scars on his hands from years of military service and eyes that had seen too many battles. His ship was one of Earth's newest and strongest, but compared to alien technology, it was still pretty basic. As he read the message about Verdania and the Korthak swarm, his face stayed calm, but his crew could see the muscles in his jaw tighten. His knuckles turned white as he gripped his coffee mug harder. Lieutenant Commander Beth Williams, his second-in-command, watched him carefully. Beth had served with Morrison for 8 years and knew that look. It meant someone was about to have a very bad day, sir, she asked quietly, waiting for his orders. Morrison finished reading the message, put down his mug, and stood up. His decision was already made, not because some fancy computer told him the odds of success, not because politicians promised rewards, but because people were dying and needed help. That was enough for any human. Plot a course for Verdania, he said in a voice that carried across the bridge, its maximum speed. And send a message to the rest of our fleet. Tell them we're going to war. As alarms began sounding across the ship and crew members ran to their battle stations, nobody asked about the odds of success, or whether they could actually beat an enemy that had destroyed 47 worlds. They were humans, and when someone called for help, they answered. Even if it meant flying straight into hell itself. When the human fleet came out of hyperspace travel, they found themselves looking at what could only be described as a vision of hell. The planet Verdania, which had once been a beautiful blue and green world full of life, now looked like a dying coal ember floating in space. The entire atmosphere was thick with nasty brown clouds that came from the Korthok bioships feeding on everything below. These weren't normal spaceships made of metal and circuits. The Korthok vessels were alive, breathing, pulsing monsters, the size of entire cities. They wrapped around the planet like giant parasites, slowly sucking the life out of everything they touched. Some were long and snake-like, others were round and bloated like ticks full of blood. All of them were covered in what looked like veins and arteries pumping with dark fluid. Corporal Danny Rodriguez stood at his station on the bridge, staring at the tactical screen that showed hundreds of red dots surrounding the planet. His mouth fell open as he counted them. Sweet Jesus, he whispered to himself. There's got to be 1,000 of those things out there. The alien ships that had followed them to observe were keeping what they thought was a safe distance, almost 3 million kilometers away from Verdania. That was about 8 times the distance from Earth to its moon. The alien commanders were sure the humans would do the same thing, maybe fire some long-range missiles, realize they were outmatched, and then retreat like every other species had done before. But Captain Morrison had other plans. His voice came over the radio to every human ship in the fleet. All ships, form up for attack. We're going in hot and fast. Before the human ships could even begin moving, Admiral Vexen's panicked voice came through from one of the alien observer ships. Captain Morrison, you cannot go in that close. The spore clouds will kill your entire crew in just minutes. Toxic levels are beyond anything most species can survive. Morrison's laugh could be heard clearly over the communication system. It wasn't a worried laugh or a scared laugh. It was the kind of laugh a person makes when someone tells them something is impossible that they do every day. Admiral, we breathe worse air than this every morning in Detroit. All Marines, get your gear ready. We're landing on that planet in 20 minutes. What happened next shocked every alien watching. The human ships didn't slow down or try to sneak around the edges of the battle. Instead, they actually sped up and flew directly toward the thickest concentration of Korthok bioships. It was like watching someone run straight into a forest fire. The Korthok vessels reacted the way they always did. It's like white blood cells attacking a disease in a body. They moved to surround and destroy the human ships before they could get close to the planet. The bioships had done this dance thousands of times before with other species, and it always ended the same way. But something happened that had never happened before in the Korthok's long history of conquest. The human ships didn't try to dodge or run away. They kept accelerating directly into the swarm of alien monsters. The first Korthok bioship that moved to block the lead human destroyer got the surprise of its life. The human ship fired nuclear-tipped missiles at point-blank range, so close that both ships were almost touching when the weapons hit. The explosion was massive, tearing through the organic hull of the bioship and sending its acidic blood spraying across several nearby Korthok vessels like deadly rain. Commander Mike Thompson was flying one of the smaller human fighter ships, diving and weaving through clouds of Korthok interceptor creatures that looked like flying squid with razor-sharp tentacles. But instead of sounding scared or worried, His voice over the radio was excited. "This is a target-rich environment, boys. Just like our training simulations, except these things actually bleed when you hit them," while the space battle was happening. Above, the first wave of human Marines was already making their way down to the planet's surface. The atmosphere of Verdania was so toxic that it had killed the previous rescue team from the Vorthon Empire within hours. The air was full of poison spores, acid rain was falling, and the temperature was hot enough to cook most alien species. Sergeant Lisa Carter led her team of Marines through the thick, poisonous fog that covered the planet's surface, where other galactic species would need special environmental suits and air filters just to survive. The humans were moving around with basic gear and breathing masks. They walked through terrain that would put most aliens in the hospital within hours. Carter checked the readings on her equipment and spoke into her radio with a calm, professional voice. "Air quality readings show it's about the same as Los Angeles on a bad pollution day. Can definitely work with this, no problem." Her Marines spread out across the toxic landscape, moving with the kind of smooth efficiency that comes from years of training in Earth's harshest environments. They had trained in the deserts of Arizona, the jungles of South America, the frozen wastes of Antarctica, and the polluted ruins of old industrial cities. This poisonous alien world was just another Tuesday for them. Above them, the space battle continued as human ships crashed through Korthok formations like bulldozers through paper walls. The aliens watching from their safe distance couldn't believe what they were seeing. Every rule of space combat, every lesson learned from 1,000 years of warfare, was being thrown out the window by these crazy humans who treated suicide. Missions like morning exercises, the Korthok bioships, which had evolved over centuries to fight predictable logical enemies, found themselves completely confused by opponents who seemed to have no sense of self-preservation whatsoever. After 2 full days of fighting, something incredible was happening that had never occurred in the Korthok. Swarm's 300 years of destroying worlds across the galaxy. The massive biomechanical hive mind that connected millions of creatures was feeling something it had never experienced before, complete and total confusion. For centuries, the Korthok had been like a perfect killing machine. They would study how their enemies fought, learn their patterns, and then adapt to beat them. It was like playing chess against an opponent who could see all your moves before you made them. But the humans weren't playing chess. They weren't even playing the same game, Major Tom. Bradley was crouched down behind the twisted remains of what used to be a Korthok biotank. The thing had been the size of a small building, covered in armor that could stop tank shells and armed with weapons that could melt through solid steel. Now it was just a smoking pile of organic metal and strange alien. Blood-taught Tom looked out at the enemy formation in front of him and did some quick math in his head. There were at least 50 Korthok warriors for every one of his soldiers. His radio was full of static, so no air support was coming. His ammunition supplies were running dangerously low. According to every military manual ever written by any species in the galaxy, his situation was hopeless. Should retreat, call for backup, or surrender. Instead, he had a completely different idea. "Johnson," she called out. To his demolitions, "Expert, you still have those mining charges we took from the construction site yesterday?" Private Rick Johnson was hiding behind a boulder about 20 feet away, grinning like a maniac behind his helmet visor. Johnson was the kind of guy who had joined the military specifically because he enjoyed blowing things up. "Yes, sir. Got enough explosive power here to level an entire city block? Maybe 2? Tom looked up at the rocky cliff face that rose high above where the Korthok swarm was gathered. The mountain was already unstable. Verdania was a geologically active planet with lots of earthquakes and shifting ground. Any engineer in the galaxy would have declared that cliff face dangerous and unsafe. "Perfect," Tom said. "See that cliff? Hanging over their heads? I want you to bring the whole damn mountain down on top of them." What happened next would have given safety inspectors from every civilized species in the galaxy heart attacks. The humans didn't just set off their explosives randomly. Johnson had been studying the planet's seismic activity patterns, and he timed the detonation to happen right when Verdania's natural earthquake tremors were at their strongest. The result wasn't just an explosion, it was like triggering a small, controlled earthquake that sent millions and millions of tons of rock Sliding down the mountainside, the Korthok bioforms, which had evolved to fight on solid, stable ground, suddenly found themselves buried under an avalanche that would have impressed even the Rocky Mountains back on Earth. The few Korthok creatures that managed to survive. The rockslide clawed their way out of the rubble, expecting to find their human enemies crushed or fleeing in terror. Instead, they discovered that the humans had already set up defensive positions using the fallen rocks as perfect cover. What should have been a natural disaster had been turned into a tactical advantage. On the other side of the battlefield, Commander Janet Davis was trying something that no military academy in the galaxy had ever taught in their classes. Her unit had managed to capture several Korthok communication nodes, the organic structures that the swarm used to coordinate their attacks. Instead of destroying them or trying to hack them, she had a much more creative idea. She ordered her technicians to hook up speakers to the communication network and began broadcasting Earth music at maximum volume. But this wasn't soft, relaxing music. This was the heaviest, most aggressive death metal and hardcore rock that humanity had ever produced. The Zilani liaison officer who was working with the human forces covered his sensitive hearing organs with all four of his hands as the brutal music pounded through the communication system. Is this actually an effective military strategy? He asked, shouting to be heard over the noise. Commander Davis had to duck as a Korthok warrior came charging at their position. She was still smiling as she explained. The swarm uses bioelectrical frequencies to coordinate their movements and share information. This music creates interference patterns that mess up their neural networks. Plus, my Marines always fight better when they have good music to keep them motivated. As if to prove her point, the charging Korthok warrior suddenly stumbled and nearly fell as the heavy metal music disrupted its connection to the hive mind. The creature's coordination was completely thrown off, and it crashed headfirst into a pile of debris before it could recover. Corporal Amy White came flying out of nowhere and tackled the alien monster that was easily twice her size. Armed with nothing but a standard military combat knife, and what her old training sergeant back on Earth had called aggressive enthusiasm, she proceeded to take down a biomechanical killing machine in hand-to-hand combat. The Korthok hive mind was experiencing something like a mechanical breakdown. For 3 centuries, it had conquered world after world by learning, adapting, and evolving past every defense its enemies could create. But how do you adapt to opponents who turn natural disasters into weapons? How do you evolve past enemies who use music as a battlefield tactic? How do you predict the behavior of a species that treats impossible odds as just another day at the office? All across the battlefield, human forces were implementing strategies that violated every known rule of warfare. They used the planet's toxic atmosphere as chemical weapons. They turned unstable terrain into tactical advantages. They treated environmental hazards as useful tools instead of dangerous obstacles. The Korthok swarm, which had devoured 47 worlds using logic, adaptation, and overwhelming force, found itself completely unable to understand an enemy that seemed to operate on pure chaos and stubborn determination. The Korthok's central intelligence was something that had never existed anywhere else in the galaxy. Imagine a single brain the size of a moon connected to millions of creatures across dozens of star systems, able to think a million thoughts at the same time. For over 300 years, this massive collective mind had been the perfect military strategist. It could analyze any enemy's fighting style, predict their next moves, develop countermeasures faster than any general or computer ever built. But now, for the first time in its entire existence, the Korthok Central Intelligence was feeling something that it had never experienced before. If such a vast alien mind could feel panic, that's exactly what was happening. The hive mind kept trying to run calculations on human behavior, but every prediction came back with error messages. It was like trying to solve a math equation where the numbers kept changing randomly. Down on the planet's surface, Colonel Steve Mitchell was about to do something that made every alien observer think the humans had finally lost their minds completely. He gathered his entire battalion, about 800 soldiers, and prepared to charge directly into the heart of the largest Korthok ground formation on the continent. The alien military experts watching through their Long-range sensors immediately started calculating casualty rates. The humans were outnumbered at least 20-1. Korthok had biotanks the size of apartment buildings. Warrior creatures that could tear through steel with their bare claws. And defensive positions that had been reinforced with organic armor stronger than anything most species could produce, according to every military textbook ever written. Mitchell's charge should have resulted in the complete destruction of the human force within minutes. Instead, something impossible began to happen. The humans started winning, not through superior firepower or better tactics, but through what could only be described as pure, insane courage. Contact left. Biotank incoming. Sergeant Maria Gonzalez shouted over the noise of battle as she spotted a massive Korthok creature moving toward their position. The thing was the size of a 3-story building, covered in thick organic armor that could stop tank shells, and armed with bioweapons that could melt through solid rock. Most military units would have immediately called for air support. Heavy artillery, or at least anti-tank missiles. Some might have tried to retreat to a better defensive position, but Private Kevin Murphy had a different idea entirely. Without waiting for orders or backup, Kevin grabbed his backpack full of high explosives and ran straight toward the biotank. Not away from it. Toward it. The alien observers couldn't believe what they were seeing. It was like watching someone charge at a moving train armed with nothing but a stick of dynamite. Kevin leaped onto the biotank's back, like he was jumping onto a moving bus, except this bus was covered in spikes, acid, and probably wanted to eat him. His old drill instructor back on Earth had once told him he had more guts than sense. Kevin was about to prove that observation absolutely correct. The explosion that followed was visible from orbit. Kevin's backpack contained enough explosives to level a small building. When it went off while he was sitting right on top of the biotank's main nervous system, the results were spectacular. The biotank didn't just die, it exploded like an organic bomb, taking out 3 nearby Korthok warriors and a command node that the aliens had thought was positioned safely behind their front lines. Meanwhile, up in space, Captain Morrison was implementing naval tactics that made the alien observers seriously question whether humans understood the basic concept of self-preservation. His destroyer, the UES Defiance, was diving through the thickest concentrations of Korthok biovessels. It's like a shark swimming through a school of fish. But Morrison wasn't just flying through them, he was ramming them. His ship would accelerate to maximum speed and crash directly into biovessels that were 10 times larger and supposedly much stronger, according to every law of physics and common sense. These should have been suicide missions that destroyed his ship and accomplished nothing. Sir, we're taking massive damage to the hull. Lieutenant Chris Anderson called out from his engineering station as alarms blared throughout the ship. The Defiance was shaking like a paint mixer. Sparks were flying from damaged systems, and half the lights had gone out. Morrison's response was typical of human military leadership. "Hull damage builds character, Lieutenant," he said calmly. Already planning their next attack run against a biovessel that was bigger than some space stations. Besides, our insurance premiums are all paid up. What happened next defied every principle of space combat that had been developed over thousands of years. When Morrison's relatively small destroyer crashed into the massive Korthok biovessel, the impact somehow triggered a cascade failure in the alien ship's organic systems. The biovessel began releasing clouds of toxic spores that were meant to kill enemies, but instead ended up poisoning 6 smaller Korthok ships that were flying too close. Morrison's crew managed to extract their battered ship from the wreckage of the biovessel, already discussing their next impossible attack, run like they were planning a weekend camping trip. The alien observers were starting to wonder if humans actually understood that they could die in these battles, down on the planet, across the battlefields, and throughout the orbital combat zones. The same pattern was repeating itself over and over. Humans would find themselves in situations that should have been certain death, and then somehow turn those situations into victories through sheer, stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The Korthok hive mind was slowly learning a terrible truth about these strange creatures from the death world called Earth. Some species, it realized, were simply too stubborn to recognize when they were supposed to be beaten. The humans weren't winning because they were smarter or stronger or better equipped. They were winning because they literally didn't know how to give up. For a collective intelligence that had conquered nearly 50 worlds through logic and adaptation. Facing an enemy that operated on pure determination and organized chaos was like trying to fight a force of nature itself. The final battle was about to begin, and it started with the discovery of something that made even the bravest alien warriors consider running away and never looking back. Deep beneath Verdania's surface, buried 12 miles down in the planet's molten core. The long-range sensors had found the source of all their problems, the Korthok queen form. This wasn't just another bioship or warrior creature. The queen form was the beating heart of the entire swarm, a massive living computer. That controlled every single Korthok creature across multiple star systems. It was like finding the brain that controlled a body with millions of arms and legs, all working together to destroy everything in their path. The alien military experts immediately began running calculations on what it would take to reach this monster and destroy it. The numbers that came back made their computers crash from sheer impossibility. The journey would require traveling 12 miles straight down through molten rock hot enough to vaporize steel, poisonous gases that could kill most life forms instantly, and tunnel systems, actively defended by the most dangerous creatures the Korthok had ever evolved. The alien commanders looked at these numbers and immediately declared the mission impossible. No sane species would even attempt such a suicide. Run. The smart move would be to evacuate the system and write off Verdania as another lost world. Captain. Morrison read the same report and gave the most typically human response imaginable. Well, that thing ain't gonna kill itself, is it, Commander? Jennifer Brooks volunteered to lead the descent team, which tells you everything you need to know about human psychology. While other species were calculating survival odds and declaring the mission impossible, Jennifer was already picking which Marines would be crazy enough to follow her straight into what was basically the entrance to hell itself. The geological surveys they were following would have given any sane species nightmares for months. They were planning to rappel down volcanic fissures that registered temperatures hot enough to melt the strongest alloys used in galactic spaceship construction. The air down there was more poison than oxygen, and the pressure levels would crush most aliens like empty tin cans. It's just like basic training in Hawaii, Jennifer called out to her team as they began their descent. Though her environmental suit was already flashing red warning lights about dangerous heat levels, except with more giant bug monsters trying to eat us. The Korthok had spent centuries preparing for this exact scenario. They knew that eventually someone might try to attack the queen form directly, so they had evolved the perfect defenders for the deep tunnels. These creatures had armor plating that could deflect energy weapons, reflexes faster than most species could even see, and there seemed to be an endless supply of them pouring out of the tunnel walls. But there was one thing they had never prepared. For humans, Sergeant Bob Taylor led his squad into the first wave of tunnel defenders and immediately began what he cheerfully called aggressive negotiations. This was military speak for using flamethrowers at close range, shouting creative combinations of swear words that would make sailors blush, and completely ignoring every rule in the tactical handbook. The Korthok creatures charged at them with claws that could slice through tank armor and speed that made them blur as they moved. According to every military simulation ever run, the humans should have been torn apart in seconds. Instead, something amazing happened. The humans started winning, or adapting to our weapons fire. Corporal Nancy Scott yelled over the sound of battle as she watched Korthok shells begin to deflect their plasma bolts like they were rubber balls. Most military forces would have retreated at this point, called for backup, or tried to find better weapons. Sergeant Taylor had a different solution. Then we stop using weapons, he said, drawing his combat knife, a simple piece of sharpened steel that hadn't changed much in design for hundreds of years. Time for some old-fashioned violence, people. What happened next would be talked about. In military academies across the galaxy, for generations, human Marines began fighting biomechanical killing machines in hand-to-hand combat, using nothing but knives, fists, and what could only be described as weaponized fury. The Korthok hive mind watched in complete horror as its perfect tunnel defenders were being defeated by primitive steel blades wielded by creatures that seemed to think close combat with monsters twice their size was just another day at the office. Finally, after hours of fighting through 12 miles of the most dangerous terrain in the galaxy, Commander Brooks reached the chamber where the Queen Form waited. What she found there would have sent most species running in terror. The Queen Form was enormous. As big as a cathedral back on Earth, it pulsed with bioelectric energy that connected it to every core thought creature in the galaxy. Organic cables and neural pathways covered the chamber walls like a massive nervous system. This single creature coordinated the thoughts and actions of millions of bioships across dozens of star systems. According to every military analysis computer in the galaxy, destroying something this size and this well-protected would require orbital bombardment from a safe distance using the most powerful weapons available. No one person could possibly take it down alone. Brooks looked at the few explosive charges she had left, quickly calculated her odds of survival, and then made the most human decision possible. She decided that the odds didn't matter. "Tell my kids I went out like a complete badass," she transmitted back to the surface. Before personally running straight at the Queen Form, with a nuclear charge in her hands, the explosion that followed was so massive it collapsed 12 miles of underground tunnels, completely eliminated the swarm's command structure, and created an earthquake that could be felt on the other side of the planet.
All right.
Brooks should have been vaporized instantly. Instead, the rescue teams found her 3 hours later, alive in a small air pocket with just enough oxygen to keep her breathing until help arrived. When they asked how she survived a nuclear explosion at point-blank range, she just shrugged and said, "Lucky, I guess." With their Queen Form dead and their hive mind destroyed, the Korthok bioships began retreating from Verdania like lost children. For the first time in 3 centuries, the swarm that had devoured 47 worlds was running away. The alien observers who had watched the entire battle finally understood what they had witnessed. They had seen a species that treated galactic extinction-level threats like just another Tuesday at the office. The humans hadn't won through superior technology or brilliant strategy. They had won by being too stubborn to accept that losing was even an option. Within a week, 17 different worlds had submitted formal requests asking for human military assistance with their own impossible problems. The galaxy had learned an important lesson that day. Sometimes the best answer to an impossible situation is to call the species that's too crazy to understand why it's impossible, the humans. For their part, just asked where they needed to ship the next load of Marines.